If you take a look at your watches now, it's about 10 to 7 Nelson time. But we beg for your patience just a little bit. We have a few concerns that we have to resolve, but we want to get going just as soon as we can get everything in place. Okay, thank you very much. The group that is presenting tonight piped in. And I would ask that when they are being piped in, that you all stand and honor the group that is making the delivery this evening. Following that, we have a welcoming address from the chairman of our board, and you'll have a presentation given to you by our Member of Parliament, Mr. Lyle Christensen. And then at that point, I'm going to step out of the way, and Mr. Norris Bick, who is here with us for the conference from Calgary with CBC, will be your master of ceremonies for the rest of the program. Mr. Hunter, can we have just a little more?
The music we sang for you, we've sung it many times in the last month and a half, and so we would guess that you wouldn't mind hearing it twice. I mean, a month and a half for 3 songs, that's not bad, considering the 4th is O Canada and the 5th will be something else sung 15 minutes after the keynote address. So if we can sing it 22 times or twice as many times, perhaps you can listen to it twice. And maybe in hearing it second time, you'll hit the next level of appreciation, or you'll be able to compare it with the first time and be more critical of what you're hearing. This is a jazz choir which meets. It's a choir which is an audition choir. These grade 10s, 11s, and 12s auditioned, and they rehearse, would you believe, at 7:30 in the morning, 3 times a week. And this is what they've been able to accomplish in a month. 5 of these people are from last year's jazz choir. The others have had a little choir experience here and there, but they are very talented individuals who have been able to pull this together in a month and a half. We know how much distance we have yet to go, but we're quite proud of what has been accomplished in a month and a half.
Midway are fading above. Oh, that's fine. That's no problem. Thanks very much, Bill. Anyway, that's always a good way to start. I'd first of all like to begin by greeting all of you, especially to those of you that have come from outside of the Kootenays, or outside of the West Kootenays in particular. And whether you're students or educators or educational officials or activists, and it's possible, as you know, to belong to one or more of all of those various groups, welcome to the West Kootenays. I hope you have a wonderful time while you're here. I would, on behalf of my colleagues in Ottawa, both in Parliament and in the government, also like to express our appreciation for all the work that has gone into your important conference and workshops during this coming weekend. I was up at Bob Harrington's home up near Galena Bay, which most of you, especially if you come out from outside of the Kootenays, won't have the least idea where that is. But it's a beautiful setting, and it was a lovely spot for the kind of ideas to germinate that gave birth to this kind of conference that you're going to enjoy and get so much out of this weekend. And also, my congratulations and our collective congratulations, of course, to School District Number 7, who saw the light and saw the importance of providing the kind of information and the kind of forum which is so necessary both in our country and in our planet today. You know, George Bernard Shaw, or Bernard Shaw as he liked to be called, once said, "Youth is such a wonderful thing, what a shame to waste it on children." And he wasn't disparaging young people or disparaging youth, but rather he was expressing his own envy and his jealousy that because he and others of his age had accumulated experience, they now found themselves very often too tired or perhaps too cynical to use the knowledge that they had gained in order to make effective changes to this planet. And at no time has it been more necessary. But through conferences like this, and because the people in School District 7 and people like the Harringtons and the many others that have worked so hard to put this together know the importance of what Shaw was talking about, you have the opportunity, whether you're students or educators, to either for yourselves or to pass on to others of your generations or to those that you're responsible for teaching, an accumulation of knowledge, not only of facts, but of experience in terms of the kind of actions that are going to be required if we're to have any realistic chance of saving this planet. Looking at the Vancouver Sun the other day, I saw a headline, and some of you perhaps saw it too, from Arthur Erickson forecasting a population of 10 million for Greater Vancouver. And I don't know what it did to you, but by God, it frightened me. One of the things that makes life so beautiful in this kind of area and in this country is that we've got breathing space and we've got room. We're not rats in a cage. And while, yes, we have to bear our share of the responsibility for other peoples around the world, one of the things that we owe to them and to ourselves and to those who will come after us is to preserve some of that space and some of those other forms of life other than human that are what being civilized should be all about. Anyway, this is your conference. I hope to get together with you at other times during the course of this weekend to join with you in learning and perhaps in sharing a few experiences. But suffice it to say that I'm heartened, and all of those who are perhaps sometime overly cynical in this business called politics, and it's one of the forms of activism that you will have to engage in, you know, are so happy to see this kind of start being made. Congratulations for being here. Hope you have a great time, and let's save the planet together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christensen. And now to bring you welcome from School District Number 7, I'm going to call upon our chairperson of the board, Jan Lindsay.
Thank you very much. You got the chairperson right, and then he almost missed the name. Usually they say chairman. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here this evening. I'm pleased that we are seeing so many people here showing this kind of interest. Getting high on nature, it's a very critical topic right now, and we certainly hope that this conference will provide an opportunity for you to achieve new heights of awareness and understanding, because it's through achieving new heights of consciousness that hopefully we will be moved to greater heights of action and commitment. I think it's quite unusual for a school district to be hosting this type of conference that has this broad global focus. Usually we host conferences that have a specific curricular focus. And this really wouldn't have come about except for a very small group of dedicated individuals. First of all, the Harringtons, both Bob and Linda, they came to our district. They showed tremendous confidence in our district and our ability to host this kind of conference, and I thank them for that. Secondly, Mr. Maslechko, our superintendent, he immediately recognized the value in this idea and brought it to the board. And I think he should be commended for that. At that point, the board did support the idea, but with the one proviso was that we could find enough individuals that had the energy and the time, which is quite amazing when we know what our staff do, to organize something like this. And characteristically of school district number 7, Mr. Maslechko had no difficulty at all in finding that group of people. He quickly added to his team Debra Lindholm, Helene McGall, Pat Dooley, Bill Reed, Ed Sakula, Dave Olenek, and Bonnie Clovance. On behalf of the board, I'd really like to express our sincere appreciation for the many, many hours that these individuals have put into organizing this conference. And I would ask you to help me in expressing that now. Thank you. Out of that group, there's one young lady that really committed an overwhelming number of hours. It seemed in the last couple of weeks, no matter what time I went past the board office, whether it was 7 a.m. or 6:30 p.m., she was always there. And that's Debra Lindholm. I'm sure a lot of you people know of her because when you phoned in to do your registrations, that's who you got on the phone. And at this point, I'd like to ask Debbie to come up and accept an appreciation, or a token of the board's appreciation on behalf of the committee and in recognition of the many hours that she personally has put into this conference. Debbie? Thank you, Debbie. Debbie really got into this effort for about the last 3 weeks. Every time I've walked into the board office, she's been asking me, do you now turn off your tap when you brush your teeth? And I told her I would give my answer at the conference, and it is yes, Debbie. I am now finally turning off the tap while I brush my teeth, thanks to you. I would also like to express our appreciation to the presenters and the contribution that you're making to this. It's only through your willingness to share your knowledge that we are able to achieve the new heights of consciousness that hopefully we will achieve throughout the conference. And I thank you very much for that. I think you might have heard many scientists and environmentalists predict that the 1990s must be the turnaround decade if we are going to achieve a sustainable future. And I think the very critical first step in that is education. I'm very pleased, again, on behalf of the board, to welcome you here tonight to share with us in this conference and taking this very critical first step. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I turn this over to Mr. Norris Bick, who will take you through the rest of the conference, there's one more thing that I'd like to say, and that is that I'd like to extend thanks to the LVR staff and administration for so willingly giving up their school at the time when we named the date for the conference. I phoned over here And without any hesitation at all, Mr. Reed said, yeah, it's on, you'll have the school, and it's all yours. I'd also like to thank Mr. Hunter and the band and the choir for the entertainment that they presented to us this evening. At this time then, yeah. At this time then, I turn it over to Mr. Norris Bick.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is very fortuitous that I am here. My boss just happens to be married to Cynthia Pollock-Shea, one of the major presenters tomorrow. And I don't know what went on behind the scenes, but thanks to him, I'm here. Or perhaps to her influence. I want to thank Bill Maslechko. You people are very fortunate to have a man like him in your area. My father was a school superintendent. They are a rare breed, and the good ones are much to be admired. He and the likes of Bob Harrington are gems, and you're very fortunate to have them. I hope you realize that. When I said I would do this some months ago, I wasn't too sure what I was getting myself into. Now I'm sure. I'm not too sure it was a wise idea, but nevertheless, here we go. Since this conference was announced, I have noticed a plethora of things in the press, in particular the print medium, concerning the environment. Just today, as a matter of fact, in the Calgary Herald, they've discovered another green slime in the beautiful Bow River, which for years has been touted as the most beautiful trout stream on the face of the earth. That's today. The green slime is back again. 2 days ago, an international conference on the environment was opened in Sofia, Bulgaria, including 35 countries. So we're on the right track. We must be doing something right. People are starting to listen to people. Now, if we can get governments to listen, and thank heavens we have members like our honorable member here tonight, there's the rub, and he said it. You're going to have to become politically active, was what he meant, I think, in order to get anything done. So in the next couple of days, we're going to explore the things that we should be doing, directions we should be going, and perhaps how we can tackle some of these problems. And one of the people who's been on the cutting edge of environment issues is one of our very own senators, the Honorable Herbert Sparrow. He's a rancher. He's a multi-award winner. He has been recognized nationally and internationally. All his, not all of his awards, but some of his awards are listed in the program if you have one and would care to read it. And it is wonderful to have him here because he probably is known among his peers, although those of us who pay proper homage call him his honorables or some such thing. I think some of them call him his orneriness because he will not agree that black is white when it comes to the environment. He has been awarded several recognitions for soil conservation. I think it would be redundant of me to say anything else when we have, as I called him earlier this evening, His Eminence here. Would you please welcome the Honorable Senator Herb Sparrow.
First of all, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. I talked to the Prime Minister earlier today and told him I was coming here, and he asked me to bring you his greetings and to tell you of the high esteem in which he holds the Senate. John Turner is having back trouble, as you know. He won't be back in the next election. I was listening to your Member of Parliament and his message, and it reminded me of what the Prime Minister Mulroney is saying, and that he's, after 4 or 5 years in government, he's talking about honesty in government. Now I say, Mr. Member, that wouldn't it be a terrible thing for us politicians if something like that caught on? When I told my wife I was coming to this conference, and I was bragging a little bit because I think it's an important conference, I said, I want to tell you there'll be a lot of important people there. She said, well, I want to tell you something. There'll be one less important person than you think. I just came from a very important speaking engagement in the UK. That's uptown Kelowna. So I'm very certainly come with some experience. I thank you for the kind introduction. I'm usually introduced, and I don't think he did it tonight, but I'm usually introduced as being married and having 6 children. And it's true. I am married and I have 6 children. When I was introduced 2 nights ago at a conference, the fellow sitting next to me, he said, you have 6 children? And I said, yes. And he said, gosh, he said, I wish I had 6 children. I said, why would you want 6 children? And he said, because I have 10. He did introduce me as a farmer and a rancher, and it's true, I am a farmer and a rancher, and I like speaking in rural Ontario and in Quebec and the Atlantic province because they think these ranchers are great. They think there's a lot of money in ranching and so on. So anyway, I was introduced a few days ago in rural Ontario as a farmer and a rancher, and this fellow sitting beside me said, you're a rancher? And I said, yes. He said, do you have a big ranch? And I said, well, when I get in my half-ton truck in the morning, it takes me till noon to get to the other side of my ranch. And he said, I know what you mean. I used to have a truck like that too. People always try, you always like to get away from home because you can feel more important, and people somehow or other think you're important. And when I'm at home, I live in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. I try to visit the senior citizens' homes as much as I can. And when I was there last weekend, I went to the Senior Citizens Lodge, and I'm talking to this older gentleman there, and I'm talking to him for quite a while, and finally I said, you know who I am, don't you? And he said, no. No, he said, I don't know who you are. But he said, if you go to the office, they'll probably be able to tell you who you are. I want to talk to you tonight about this, what I consider a most important conference, and that's about soil conservation and soil degradation. Soil degradation is a serious national problem requiring national attention. Our soils are at risk. Our future is eroding. The issue of the day is soil degradation. Canada is facing the most serious agricultural crisis in its history. Unless action is taken quickly, this country will lose a major portion of its agricultural capabilities. The Soil Conservation Society of America made this statement recently. Soil erosion may well be the most underrated yet most damaging natural resource problem of the 80s. Must we wait for crisis conditions before action is taken to safeguard our scarce and dwindling soil resource base? Unquote. In the book, Will the Bounty End?, written by Gary Fairburn, published by the Western Producer, and commissioned by the Agricultural Institute of Canada, makes this statement. Canada may be headed toward the greatest environmental disaster in its history, a disaster that would produce harmful economic effects unparalleled since the Depression. The threat is nothing less than the land's current capacity to continue producing food, unquote. I commend that book to any student of soil degradation or soil conservation in Canada. There are not many publications out on soil conservation and soil degradation. The book Soil at Risk that some of you have received, and if there were not enough copies, please leave your name at the registration desk and a copy will be sent to you very shortly, free of charge if you should be desirous of one. There is very little written information about soil conservation and soil degradation. We live by the soil, we die by the soil. Let's then talk about soil degradation and soil conservation in Canada. First of all, let me tell you this, that I am aware that you know far more about the problems in your area than I know. I'm not coming in here tonight as some expert to tell you your problems and to tell you the solutions to those problems, because I'm certain those of you here are here to learn, and you're here to share your thoughts and your ideas with your other colleagues here. So certainly I am not that expert coming in and telling you those stories. I see, though, my job is to help find a means to better manage the problem of our soils. How? By assisting in the mobilization of money, manpower, and technology into a driving force for soil conservation in Canada. When I tell you the most serious crisis facing the agricultural industry today is soil degradation, that no way undermines the problem of economics in agriculture, because I know the economic situation is serious throughout this country and in fact throughout the world in agriculture. But hopefully that serious economic crisis will end within the next 6 months, with the next year or the next 2 years. If it goes beyond 3 years, we'll lose our agricultural industry anyway if we don't have protection for that industry. But the most serious crisis today, tomorrow and next year and 10 years from today, is soil degradation. I have spoken to bigger audiences than you are tonight. I spoke to 5,000 people on this subject in Australia. I spoke to 3,500 in Reno. But I want to tell you this without sounding as if I'm patronizing you. I'm saying that I have never spoken to what I would consider a more important audience, because it's the type of people that are here today who are interested in the problems and in the future, in fact, can do something about this very problem and get the message across to other people. I want to apologize to those people who've heard me speak before, because you're basically going to hear the same message that I've given on other occasions. When I say apologize, I do say that rather facetiously, because I don't really apologize. The message I want to leave with you tonight, and the message I want you to carry, needs repeating and repeating. You know the old story, you can repeat a lie and repeat a lie and repeat a lie, it's still a lie. But many times you repeat the truth and you repeat the truth, and still people do not believe that's truth, but you have to keep talking about it. So once is never enough. Let me talk then a little bit to you about about this problem of soil degradation in Canada. And let me tell you that there's a great deal of knowledge out there about soil conservation and soil degradation. But there's a great deal of frustration out there amongst the people who know something about the subject. They can see the terrible things that are happening to our environment, and particularly the subject matter tonight of our soils, and to have that sense that really very little is being done about it. They feel, and we know, that the technologies that are out there to conserve our soils in too many instances aren't being delivered to the farm gate where they can be put into practice to save those soils. The cost of production, which is no news to you, is high. And it's so high, in fact, and the return so low that even if the farmer wants to be a conservationist, too many times he can't afford to be, because he needs every dollar income to just make that living, so that he can't pour money back for the future into that agricultural land. Okay, what else is there? Well, let me tell you this, there's soil degradation in every part of Canada. Every agricultural area in this nation is faced with serious soil degradation. Not just interior BC or not just Saskatchewan, where I come from, but every part of this nation. When I talk about soil degradation, then what do I talk about? I talk about erosion. I talk about erosion by wind. I talk about erosion by water. I talk about acidification of the soils, compaction of the soils, the loss of organic matter in the soils, salinization in the soils, the devastating effects of mining and oil development and forestry. I talk about the devastating effects of the urban encroachment onto the best farmland in this nation. The urban encroachment for residential development, for commercial development, and for industrial development. That's happening in every part of this nation, some more so than others, but they're all affected by those terrible forms of degradation. Let me then talk for a minute, and I suppose to take you across Canada to indicate to you what's happening all over this nation. So what good is it that I or you save all of the agricultural land in British Columbia, but we let the rest of the nation's soils go by the way? How can we expect to British Columbia to feed Canada as a nation without all of the agricultural areas of this country? Certainly I would appeal to you to save your soils because it's a necessary part. But we have to worry about all of Canada. We have to develop a conservation ethic in this country that says the land comes first. Let's talk about that beautiful part of the country which is Atlantic Canada. And let me tell you, in that beautiful part of this nation, they started out 150 years ago with 18 inches of topsoil across that country. You know what they've got left now? An average of 6 inches of topsoil. And did we lose that topsoil in the last 150 years? No. We lost it in the last 40 years and 50 years. By the changing in the farming practices, by the process of continuous cropping, monoculture basis of the same crop year after year, leaving that soil black in the fall, black in the winter, and black in the spring. And when the heavier snowfalls and the melts came and the heavy rains came, it just washed that fragile soil away. Where to? Into the lakes, into the rivers, into the streams, and it's gone forever. That part of the nation is built on bedrock. And when that soil is gone, there's no way you can produce new topsoils. In this part of Western Canada, some parts of your province and in Western Canada, by perfect farming practices, you might be able to produce an inch of topsoil in 30 years. But if you're gone in bedrock, it's gone. There's no provision for new topsoil. And all across this nation, we're losing more than an inch of topsoil every year. We're losing or every 30 years. So we're on a terrible downward slide. I was speaking in the Atlantic provinces last January, and they had a 30-inch snowfall. And they get that occasionally. And it snowed for 3 days, and there was 30 inches, better than 30 inches, moving through the Montreal area into the Atlantic provinces. And they were driving me from Charlottetown to some place to speak. And you could, it was the second day of the snowstorm, and the wind was blowing very bad and snowing hard. And you look out the car windows, and the knolls and the farmland were black. No protective cover to hold those soils in place. The windshield wipers of the car were going to keep topsoil off the windshield. Can we do without the agricultural land in the Atlantic provinces? The answer is no. We have to start saving those soils there. Let's talk about the beautiful province of Quebec. And let me tell you this, that they have the most advanced agricultural system anywhere in the world, be it row crops, be it cereals, be it livestock and poultry, fruits and vegetables. We're very jealous of them sometimes because of the methods in which they've supported their agriculture, because we have felt sometimes it's been detrimental to us. But that's not the question tonight. The question is the ability to produce food for themselves and for other Canadians. You know that 50% of the soils in the province of Quebec are organic soils. Organic soils that are much more fragile than most of the soils in the rest of the country, and the soils under your forest here are basically organic and very fragile, so you know what I'm talking about. You know that those soils in Quebec, some of those soils I'm talking about, oh, let me tell you, the land in Quebec all slopes, it drains to the St. Lawrence. And there's studies been done recently on those soils. Unless something is done to protect those soils, to keep a cover crop on that so that when the winds come and the rains come, that they can withstand that pressure, a lot of that land will be non-productive in agriculture in 20 years. I'm not talking lifetimes or generations. I'm talking 20 years. And very little at the moment is being done about that. Can we afford to lose that part of the agricultural industry? The answer is no. And they've got all of those other forms of degradation I talked about. The acidification of the soils, the compaction of the soils, the loss of organic matter in the soils, and the devastating effects of urban development on those soils. You know what the federal and the provincial government of Quebec allowed us Canadians to do? To go into outside of Montreal and for the Mirabel Airport, buy 75,000 acres of the best farmland in all of Canada to build an airport. You know what they did? They bought that land and they paid the farmer a third or 50% or 100% more than it was worth for agricultural use. The farmer thought he was getting a good buy, and the governments and the industrialists knew they were getting a hell of a buy. 75,000 acres. You know what they're using of that land now? They're using about 5,000 acres of it very inefficiently. They cash leased that land out and destroyed thousands of acres of it, millions of tons of topsoil. They're trying to get some of it back into the hands of the original farmers. But the point that I'm trying to get to you is that they believed that there was a higher use for farmland than agriculture. They said it's there and it's dirt cheap. Buy it. We'll cover that with industry, with commerce, and with residential. We don't need that land. Let's talk about Ontario. Let's talk about the problems in that part, a beautiful part of this country. And let me tell you, they have all of those forms of degradation, except in salinization, which is a phenomena for the prairies, basically. They have all of those forms of degradation, but they're in exaggerated form. Why? Because of the climatic conditions of that province, because of the topography of that province, because of the industrial complex in that province, that they are in very bad shape. And unless they do something, about the agricultural lands to conserve them and protect them from the vagaries of weather, plus the human aspect. They'll be non-viable in the agricultural industry in that part of the country in less than 40 years. Can we as Canadians just plan that far ahead? The answer is no. I spoke many times in Ontario, but their greatest problem, of course, is the monoculture basis of the single crop in turn, leaving that land black. Black in the fall, black in the winter, black in the springs for those heavy rainfalls. And the water just takes those lands into the same areas I told you about, the low-lying lakes, rivers, and streams. I was in Ontario 3 years ago. I've been in Ontario many times, speaking in the London area in the month of April. And I had to stay an extra day in London, Ontario, because they closed Highway 401 for a full day because of a dust storm. You thought and I thought that only happened on the prairies. But they tell me those dust storms are there every spring since. I don't know whether they've closed the highways, but serious dust storms. Do you know that if you go on top of the CN Tower in Toronto and you look out of the top of the CN Tower on a clear day, you can see a third of all the #1 topsoils in all of Canada. The other third of the #1 soils is outside of the Montreal area where the Mirabel Airport was, in that area. In Western Canada, we farm on 3, 4, and 5 soils. I suppose I should say this. There are 7 types of soils that we record in Canada. 7 is so submarginal, it's not good for agricultural use at all. 6 is very submarginal for pasture land and so on. 3, 4, and 5 can grow cereal crops and grasses on them. 2/3 of all the #1 topsoil in all of Canada is outside the city of Toronto and the city of Montreal. And you know that that land in the province of Ontario is disappearing for urban encroachment on the basis of 50 acres an hour. If you can see, and you can't see much farmland from the door here, but wherever you're from where the farmlands are, go out your back door and just look out and just see what it would be like to see 50 acres every hour disappearing. Well, that's what's happening in there. When I was in Tillsonburg, Ontario, and remember we're talking about the airport at Mirabel, they're building a new GM Suzuki plant at Tillsonburg, Ontario. It must be awfully close to being finished now. And we knew that this Soil Conservation Canada, which I was president of at the time, knew that this plant was being considered. And we put some pressure on the Ontario government and municipalities around to restrict where that industry went, so that it would go on submarginal land. You know what we did? We went there because outside of London, Ontario, or St. Thomas, Ontario, where the Ford plant is, they went in there and took 1,500 acres of the best farmland in this country for the industrial Ford plant. When GM Suzuki plant were going into, and in St. Thomas, they're using about 100 acres of that land. The rest they've destroyed it by driveways and mounds and places to park cars. When we went to Tillsonburg and put pressure on, you know what all the farmland they took? They only took 750 acres. Saved 750 acres. Why did they take 750 acres? Because they could get by with 100, because it was dirt cheap. There's a higher use for that land than agriculture. They want to spread other industries around them and destroy the future of this nation. Remember, our most precious national resource is our topsoils. Why do we encourage our Chamber of Commerces in our towns and our cities and our members of Parliament and our senators encourage industrial development? That's the God Almighty. Why? Because we want to increase the tax base. Why? to give jobs to our most precious national resource, our young people. To give a better life for our most precious national resource, our older people. Let me tell you this, that neither one of those are our most precious national resource. Our most precious national resource are our topsoils. And when we don't have any of those soils left, we'll know 30 or 40 years down the line which was the most important natural resource. What was the most crucial problem we had in this particular time? Let me talk about Western Canada. Let me tell you about the problems there, where because of the summer fallow basis, the cultivation practices, and if most of you know what summer fallow is, and that's leaving land black for a whole year, that they call regenerating itself. There's no crop growing on that land for a whole year. And of course there's no new organic matter going in for a whole year. The land is black. And of course when the winds come, there's nothing to protect those tiny particles of soil. When the heavy rains come, and we do get it occasionally, it in turn washes those fragile soils into the low-lying areas, and the lakes and the rivers and the streams. And you know, not only is it destroying the farmland, but it's destroying the habitat around it. The other forms of nature that are so crucial that you keep talking about. And we're destroying that life in those lakes and the low-lying areas and the rivers and the streams. We're plugging up the municipal water systems. We're doing so much damage off-farm site as well. But the crucial part is to keep that land, that soil on the land. And we have all of those other forms of degradation, plus salinization of the soils, which is salt in those soils that come up through the soils, destroying the land's capability to produce crops. Big alkali sloughs are forming because of the cultivation practices that we have there. Do you know that in Western Canada we will be very lucky if we have an agricultural industry left in 30 years? In 30 years. You know what we allow our governments to do, and you're no exception, all across this country? We allow our governments to go do what they will with our farmland. We let them destroy that land by highways and roads and pipelines and gas lines. The urban encroachment for airports, for residential development. You know, because when they're building roads and highways, what they want to do, they want to make the shortest distance between 2 points. It doesn't matter what they cross. Why do they do that? They do that so the industrial complex of this country can move its products faster and cheaper between 2 points, and those people who can afford it with their cars and their boats and motors can travel the fastest between 2 points to get to where they're going on holiday. No one thinks about what they're doing to the future of this country. When I talk about this problem, about growing our food, there are soil scientists and agrologists, and some people say, you're an alarmist. The future holds for us that we'll be able to grow our food in water or on pavement. They use that argument sometimes. Well, it may be true. I can't see that far ahead, but I don't want to take the chance on it right yet. There was a fellow who wanted to be an expert on Indians. So he went out to the Indian Reserve and he spent a whole day on the Indian Reserve. And he came back and he considered himself an expert on Indians. And he said, all Indians walk single file. At least the one I saw did. That's what we're talking about these people who say there are no problems out there. They're wearing the blinders that keeping them from seeing what's happening to their neighbor living beside them, or their neighboring province, or their neighboring country. We say that we can bring food into this nation from elsewhere if we run into a problem Well, I think that that's a very, very false statement for the future. Let's talk about your beautiful province of British Columbia. And let me tell you something that you already know. And that is that there's only 4% of the total land base in all of British Columbia that's suitable for agriculture. 4%. Do you know that in all of Canada, of that beautiful, beautiful country of all of Canada, there's only 9% of the total land base in all of Canada that will grow anything? Half of that, or 4.5% of the total land base in Canada is suitable for agricultural purposes. Your province has 4% in your base. Where is that land? Well, you know where it is. It's in the valleys. And of course, when the farmers located there, the towns came. And when the towns wanted to build, they built on the best farmland. When they wanted to expand, they expanded onto the best farmland. When you talk about this part of, we drove through your beautiful town here, city it is, excuse me, your worship if you're here. And it's all built on rock, or it appears to be built on rock. When you go to Vancouver, it's all built on rock. And they brag in British Columbia about the British properties, the beautiful homes there, the roadways, they brag about us built on rock. But we don't insist that the people in the valley do the same thing. We let them build where they will. Now, you have a land commission in British Columbia, and I want to pay compliments to that because it is a good commission. They have been doing a good job, and they're trying to do a good job in retaining that farmland. They're having some difficulties, and you're aware of that. There's a political process that takes place that can override the decision of the commission. So there is farmland being taken out, in my opinion, and put to other uses it shouldn't be. But there are times, of course, when it is necessary, where you may find, in fact, that it's necessary to take farmland out of agriculture. But if it happens, it must be taken out dragging and screaming. I talked not long ago in Richmond to the BC Farmers Federation. They toured me around the Richmond area and showed me the industrial expansion that was going on there. Showed me the farmland that was being purchased by Americans coming up and for the garden lands, paying $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 an acre for that land. I said, how can they afford to pay that? They say they're waiting for a capital gain. They'll grow their fruits and their vegetables, and that'll pay a little interest on their money and a little of the taxes. But in 5 years or 10 years, that land will be worth $300,000 an acre. There's a higher use for that land than agriculture. I said, how long do you think it will last? Some of you are probably from that area. How long do you think this farmland will last? And they said, well, some studies are done that they figure there'll be no agricultural in that area in less than 18 years. I asked about the Fraser Valley, and the statement was that with the urban encroachment and with the soil degradation that is taking place there, they'll be lucky to have an agricultural industry in 50 years. I asked the question, what will you do then to feed yourselves? And they said to me, they're talking about further diverting the Columbia River into the United States to irrigate the submarginal lands there, grow the food, and bring it back to Canada. I don't want to talk to you tonight about free trade, but I want to talk to you tonight about freedom. How can we expect to remain a free nation if we can't feed ourselves, if we don't plan for the future that we will have a sustainable life if we can't feed ourselves? That's where we're headed in this country. We say we can bring the food, we'll import our food, but from where? Are we going to bring it in from Ethiopia or Chad or Sudan or Australia or India? Is that where we're getting it from? No, sir. Do you know that Ethiopia and that area was the food basket of the world 1,000 years ago? And it took them 1,000 years to destroy their land, but it's destroyed. And the deserts are moving in the basis of 100 miles a year, slapping the citizens in the rear and moving them with their cattle herds, chopping down the tree lines. We're doing the same thing that took them 1,000 years. Well, I'll tell you how advanced we are. We're doing it in 30 or 40 years. That's how smart we are in this country. Do you really believe, do we as Canadians really believe that we should grow food in the United States and bring it up to here? The answer is no. I spoke in Shawville, Quebec, not long ago, and there was two mayors, the mayor from Shawville, which is a large city, and the mayor that they call the mayor from the rural areas. And I spoke at a conservation meeting there, and after the meeting, there was 8 or 10 of them sitting at a table that I was at, having coffee. And they were arguing amongst themselves with the two mayors, the conservationists there, talking about them bringing in a big garbage dump into the Shawville area and destroying literally thousands of acres of land to build a garbage dump that would handle the garbage from all around the area. They were talking about building a big sewage lagoon for the same purpose. They were talking about industrial encroachment of the urban community moving out to this beautiful farmland. And these people were really critical of these mayors. Finally, one of the mayors said, "Tell me, then, how much farmland are you going to need for the next 100 years? You can ask me how much land I'm going to need for industrial expansion for the next 100 years. You can ask me how much land I need for commercial development for the next 100 years. You can ask me how much land I'm going to need for residential expansion for the next 100 years. I can guess at all of those. But nobody can ask me, or should be able to ask Canadians, how much agricultural land you need for the next 100 years, because you need it forever. It's got to be there. It's got to be there for future generations. Nations have changed hands for centuries, from despot to despot, because the people had the little ability to feed themselves. When they became hungry, they accepted any despot that would come in and promise them food. What is he doing? What are you doing? Thank you. They accepted any despot to come in and take them over with the promise of food. I don't think as Canadians we want to be faced with that aspect. In the agricultural land in this province and all across the country, we have to keep that land protected and covered with cover crops, changing those farming practices, keeping the urban communities' hands off of that land whenever we can. And I appreciate the problems that some of your farmers are going through in the Okanagan. I know that they're having problems because of the markets that are dwindling on them. But that all Canadians have to share that problem with them. But sharing the problem is not taking it out of agriculture and destroying it forever. Let society pay the farming community what the land is worth in productive capacity and save it. Surely we can afford that. We're talking about the earthquake things or the cost of changing that. Well, we have just as great a disaster coming in the future that we'll not be able to pay for either if we don't start protecting those crops now. What we do with our agricultural community, in my province and yours, we give me a piece of paper like that that says, this is the title to that land. And it says, in essence, it's yours to do as you will. You can enhance it or you can destroy it. It's yours. We have to get the message across to me as a farmer and to all. no one owns that land except all of us, and the future generations own that land. You have a right to a high standard of living, but you must protect those soils in that process. Saying the right thing at the right time is important, and my wife is very good at that. We're traveling down the highway and I'm driving, and I'm stopped by the police. The policeman comes up to the window and he said, "Pardon me, sir," but he said, "You were driving 120 kilometers in a 100-kilometer zone." I said, "Well, I wouldn't be too worried about that if I was you, officer." I said, "There's no traffic on the road anyway." He said, and in addition to that, he said, "Your license is expired a month ago." And I said, "Yes, I remembered that this morning. We're going to get that changed tomorrow." He said, "Could I see your driver's license?" I said, "Well, I don't have it with me." And I said, "And besides that, why are you bothering me? Why aren't you out there catching criminals? That's supposed to be your job." And my wife chirps up and says, "Officer, don't let him bother you like that. He always talks that way when he's had too much to drink." My wife phoned me just a matter of a few days, and this is why I'm here alone tonight, but she phoned me a few days ago, excited. She said, "I just won the 649, pack your clothes." And I said, "Summer or winter?" She said, "Pack them all and be out of the house by 6 o'clock. That's why I'm here. To save our soils, we must educate everyone. It's the urban community that must get the message of conservation because they're the people that pay the price. The agriculture community has no money of its own. It must come from us as consumers. If you expect the farmer to be a conservation, you have to pay him to be one, either at the farm gate or through transfer of the funds to make it possible. The farmer has no money of his own. Let us not forget, if we destroy the soil will even up the score by destroying us. Man belongs to the soil. The soil does not belong to man. There was a farmer, a rich farmer, went to Las Vegas to gamble, and he took a beautiful girlfriend with him. And he's gambling at the tables, and he's losing very heavily. And he turns to this beautiful girl, and he says, "If I lose all my money, will you still love me?" And she said, "Yes, of course I'll still love you. I'll miss you." Well, that's what's going to happen to these lands if we continue to gamble them away like we're doing. We're going to miss them. There was a traveling evangelist going through the community, and while he was there speaking, oh, by the way, one of those preachers asked me to go on an evangelism trip with him. And I said I'd be delighted to do that, so they checked me out, but they found I wasn't that good with the women, so they wouldn't take me. The traveling evangelist was in the community, was drawing big crowds. And while he was there, he was asked if he would go speak at the mental institution. And he readily agreed. And he went out to this institution and he filled a big hall, packed her. And he stood up at the front and he said, "Why are we all here?" And the fellow at the back stood up and said, "I don't know why you're here, but we're all here because we're not all there. I don't know why you're here, but I'm glad you were. Thanks very much for having me with you."
He told me earlier that he's going to continue ranching. He was asked if he made a lot of money in ranching. He said, well, doesn't know about that, but he certainly put a lot of money into it, and he's going to continue to do it till he runs out. Now you know why he was the recipient of the Soil Conservation Society of America Honor Award for Soil Conservation, the United Nations Environmental Leadership Medal and Certificate of Distinction for Soil Conservation, the Honorary Life Membership in the Agricultural Institute of Canada, Honorary Member of the Canada Society of Soil Science, Honorary Doctor of Science McGill, the author of several publications, and the founder of Soil Conservation Canada, and the first president of Soil Conservation Canada. Now you know that. Now realize you're one of the more well-to-do ranchers because it's been properly managed and that you've been conserving your soil, but did you really want to leave me your watch?
Oh, this is my own.
Now, please welcome the Vice Chairman of the Board of School District Number 7, to whom we are so grateful, School District Number 7, for organizing this and having all these wonderful people here. Please welcome the Vice Chairman of the Board, Mr. Bob Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. MC. My duty here this evening is a very pleasant one, and I will try to be brief, but I've heard some of these stories before, and I'm sure you have, but there's no such thing as an old story. It's just a case of whether or not we have a new audience. And the MC outlined the various awards and so on that our speaker has been given through the years, and I'm afraid I'll have to repeat some of what he said to make my little presentation complete. But as my father used to say, the definition of a distinguished gentleman is a man of few words who repeats them often. And so I might become a distinguished gentleman this evening. I don't believe that any one of us, after hearing that speech, and some of us probably before that, have any illusions about the importance of soil conservation. And I grew up on a farm right near here in the Slocan Valley, and we farmed soil that had anywhere from 6 inches to 6 feet of topsoil. But we didn't find ourselves in that business long enough to run into the problems that we are hearing about, but I believe that they are real. They are not only real on the farms, but those problems are real everywhere. The whole chain of events that takes place to produce food and habitat for wildlife are all linked together. The soil on the farms, in the valleys, the soil on the mountains that hold the trees, that in turn hold the watersheds, the soil in the river bottoms and lake bottoms that are the habitat for the fish, etc. They all need our attention and our efforts to protect them. And this conference is important to you all and to me in that respect. Now, Mr. Sparrow has given us a good cross-section view of what the problems are. And I would like to point out that we can rely on the information that he has presented as a basis for this conference tomorrow and the next day. Amongst the awards that this gentleman has been given is the one from the United Nations Environmental Leadership Medal and Certificate of Distinction for Soil Conservation. And I would believe that that is not just for Saskatchewan or British Columbia, but for the whole of Canada and probably the whole of the world. He's an honorary life member in the Agricultural Institute of Canada. But one of the things that catches my interest as much as anything is his interest in soil conservation continued and led him to found a non-profit society, Soil Conservation Canada. If we're going to set an example or in any way help the rest of the world, we have to clean up our own house first. There is no other way. And in view of the contribution that Senator Sparrow has made towards this end, I would like to ask him to come forward and receive a token of our appreciation. First and foremost, can you hear me, folks? First and foremost, I would like to bestow on this gentleman the title of Mr. Conservation Canada. Now, very often we go to conferences and so on with a brown bag. Tonight we have a white one. And this token of appreciation is to go with his newly found title. I won't hold you up any longer, folks. Tomorrow morning we get off to a fresh start, and I intend to be there at the opening of the ceremonies, and we'll see you there. Thank you very much.
I was amazed to look out my hotel window when we got here to see an apple tree in full fruit, with the fruit still on it. Don't you pick your trees around here? You don't like apples? We have a lot of apples at this conference, and so that they are recognized, and we'll take this opportunity very quickly. They're not all here yet. Some are, some aren't. Those who are, please stand up and be recognized. They're all presenters. Nancy Anderson, Bob Bray, Ernie Cordonnier, Sandra Follett, Herb Hammond, Cynthia Pollock Shea. I know she's not here. She's got a young baby. She's raising a young conservationist. Bob Nixon, Dr. Mary O'Brien, Dave Olenek, O.R. Travers, Gregory Utzik, Henning von Crow. Jane Elgard is not going to be here. Guy Woods, Robert Arrington. That's my kind of guy. Lee Harding, Nancy Anderson. I already did that one, didn't I? Monty Hummel, see here. Robert Matthews. John McLeod. John and I did a radio show years ago when he was at CBC called Radio Noon. Now it's called Wild Rose Country. It's an agriculture show. It's not nearly as good and never will be. Have I missed anyone? Mary McMillan. Marilyn Taylor. Mary McMillan, did you? Yeah. As a matter of fact, Marilyn Taylor worked with John and I in those days. And Bob. Dr. V.C. Brink. Susan Crichton. Have I missed anyone? Yes, I have. Dr. Jovan Jovanovic. Bill Andrews. Did I mention his name? I think I got just about everybody. Elizabeth May isn't here yet. She'll be in tomorrow. Sherry Pettigrew is here. All right. Bill Wareham. Jim Walker. Graham Kenyon. All right. Now I would like to introduce you to a young fellow who is an amazing young chap, really. He went on quite a trip. Actually, I'm going to do that in just a moment. They want me to make some announcements. Number one, lunch tickets are available to 9 o'clock tomorrow only in the main foyer. My pleasure to introduce you to you, a young fellow who went on quite a trip with the likes of David Suzuki in this past year or so, and he has put together quite a program, and he is going to show it to us now. He's a UBC student. He was traveling the Amazon. Okay. And while that is being set up, while we're waiting to see Jeff Gibbs' slide presentation of Guardians of the Amazon, we're going to be receiving a musical presentation by the L.V. Rogers Glee Club? Jazz Choir.
The Misa Gaia song for Mother Earth. This is called The Blue-Green Hills of Earth.